that makes that kind of extended cycling with buddies such a wonderful experience.
I agree. Excellent. How are we doing, Barbara? Are you ready to
We're getting there,
introduce?
probably 30 more seconds.
Okay, I'm just wondering, will we repeat some of these things when we
As we go through our conversation, some of it might repeat, and that's okay.
okay.
Yeah.
Just wondering, because some of that I would hate for people to miss, because some of the
Yeah.
important
Yeah,
stuff.
Sure.
Yeah, feel free to incorporate that into future comments. Sure.
How
So
about
thank you.
Anne Marie?
Okay, good. Yeah.
Hey, Johns.
So welcome to Third Thursday. This is part of a continuing series that explores the outdoors. Tonight we'll be looking at the world of cycling. So my name is Barbara Dickinson. I'm Executive Director of the Friends of Handley Regional Library. The Friends have been around since 1977 to support then the Handley Library, now support the Handley Regional Library System, which has the downtown branch, Handley, the Bowman Library in Frederick County, and the Clark County Library in Berryville. The Friends support the library by raising funds, but have always been involved with bringing free programming to our community. So we're very pleased to be part of sponsoring this program, this series of programs for our community, along with our great sponsor, Mountain Trails, that has stores in Winchester and in Front Royal. We also encourage you to visit the library or the library's website and find out some of the great materials and books and DVDs that the library offers to get you more in depth or answer some more questions about the world of cycling. We also have those great films we've been talking about, like Breaking Away, one of my favorites that was in Indiana, and American Flyer. So please check out the library for books and information about the world of cycling when you get a chance. And a few more details about tonight's program. We ask if you have questions and comments, please put them in the chat area, and we'll get to those Q&A time in about an hour into the program. This program is being recorded, so in a few days, you can, your friends can access it through the library's YouTube channel if those people that didn't have a chance to participate in this evening's program. So it's my great pleasure to introduce the host for this series, Susan Shearhart. She's an avid hiker and backpacker and been the creative spark to many of the great topics that we have covered in this series on Third Thursday. And Susan will introduce tonight's guest. Susan.
Oh, thank you, Barbara. Again, it's wonderful to be with you here tonight, and thanks to the library for continuing to support this program and inviting our area residents to explore the outdoors with us. And tonight I have the pleasure of exploring the world of cycling with two local cycling enthusiasts, and they happen to be great friends, John Copenhaver and John Crandell. John Copenhaver, or Cope, as he's affectionately called, is a professor emeritus of religion and philosophy at Shenandoah University, who stays active by cycling, hiking, and swimming. And John Crandell, or Cran, is a clinical psychologist with a part-time practice counseling people. He is a Virginia master naturalist who enjoys introducing folks to the wildlife ambassadors at the Blue Ridge Wildlife Center. And this year he qualified and will compete in the age group national championships for Olympic distance triathlon. So I hope he has a chance to share a little bit about that with us tonight. So welcome, Cope and Cran. I'm grateful to have you here this evening to share your stories. I'm going to launch a slideshow, and our conversation tonight will kind of coincide with some of these photos that we're going to share. Hopefully it works well. It's our first attempt at combining the two in this way. And as I launch this, I'm going to let Cope and Cran, we'll start with Cope, and to start explaining just a little bit about how they got into cycling. What is your background with cycling? Here's our two gentlemen. Of course, you can see them on the screen. But perhaps you start, Cope, and telling about your history with cycling.
Yes, well, I got involved in cycling in a more serious way when I moved to Northern Virginia. I lived in Falls Church, and nearby our house where we were living at the time was the W&OD Trail. And I just saw people riding on that. It looked so pleasant. So I bought my first serious road bike and began biking in. I'd bike into the National Zoo. You could get on the trail and go down to Mount Vernon. And so that was a lot of fun getting introduced to that. But I put it aside for a good while until we moved to Winchester, and then it wasn't until I've been here a few years and found some other friends who like to cycle that, and so when we moved to Winchester about 2000, I got started back again, and a little more serious cycling then.
Awesome. And what kind of cyclist would you describe yourself as? Because I hear there's quite a few different types of cyclists, which I didn't realize, but how would you describe yourself?
Well, I describe myself as mostly a recreational bicyclist, but I've done a few time trials back in the day and some things of that sort. I've participated in 2 triathlons. Those were quite a while back, but I've also an occasional touring. So, and I've done some distance cycling, 3 or 4, 5 centuries. So those participated in those as well. So those are not so often, but mostly recreational for a bike for recreation, fellowship, and fitness and health.
Excellent. Okay, Cran, why don't you share your story a bit with us about your start with cycling and your journey and what you describe yourself in terms of a cyclist.
The journey for me began when I was a kid. I think the first big purchase I had was a bicycle. I paid $50 for a 2-speed Huffy. And I used that as a kid riding around Detroit because it meant freedom. I mean, I could go for a 10-mile ride to a place that had 10-cent sliders and hang out with my friends. And that's where I began. And it continued. As a 20-some-year-old, my wife and I took our first vacation with panniers and tents and biked across North Carolina. And we did that with absolute naivete about conditioning. So we were going 100 miles a day, having done no preparation.
Oh, wow.
We dived and enjoyed it. I then did cycle commuting when I was a student and a professor in Chicago. So I was doing traffic jamming in the city. But then, as John said, we got away from it as we got on with other things in life. But when we moved to Winchester, the first year we were here, I put my then 1-year-old on the back of my bike, pulled it out of storage, and went for a ride with the Winchester Wheelman. And it was on the route we were just talking about in White Post. And I was absolutely the slowest person in a group ride. First time I'd been on a bike for a couple of years. But the group leader dropped back and just kept me company. And we had a wonderful visit. My daughter enjoyed the ride. And I enjoyed the beauty of riding in Virginia. And so the Winchester Wheelman introduced me to the possibilities of riding around here. And while I didn't pick up the invitation until a number of years later, I always knew I loved cycling, and I always knew that cycling in Virginia was going to be something special. When my youngest went off to college in 2002, I decided I was going to stop living vicariously and I was going to start getting active. And I signed up for my first triathlon. I had just a goal of doing a triathlon, and I didn't know if I could do it. Part of that meant getting back on a cycle again, and instantly discovered just what a lovely experience it was. I mean, not only did I enjoy the friendship with the folks who reintroduced me to cycling, but I found my dreams at night were filled with just kind of a wonderful thrill, like I was coasting down a hill, or beautiful views of Virginia were just populating my dreams and my imagination. In short, I was hooked, and I've been hooked ever since. As a cyclist, I would describe myself as a recreational cyclist as well. I use it for fitness, and it's part of my fitness routine. But I also, and very specifically, am always training for triathlons. And in that context, since I do Olympic distance triathlons, I try to ride a 24, 25-mile route with regularity and at pace. So I try to race. I can't hold my own with some of the best of the wheelmen. There are people that are much stronger cyclists than John or I are, also more experienced cyclists. But I do go fast, and I like the speed and the thrill of going hard. And I like the way my body works when I'm working hard on. So that's probably more than a little introduction to my love.
That was perfect. That was perfect. I like that. And it's actually a really good segue into talking about your local experiences, because both of you seem to have resumed your passion for cycling when you came to the area, when you moved back to Winchester. So why don't we talk a little, some of the photos we have next are of your favorite rides and views in Virginia. And I believe some of these photos are along your favorite routes. In this picture, you have some buddies with you. So why don't we just talk a little bit about what you love about this area and where you ride. And Crand, you want to go first?
Yeah, this picture is Earth Day 2017, and we're up on Skyline Drive. It's a day they close the road down to vehicle traffic, and they turn the cyclists loose. I'm with the Lay family, who are professional cyclists and are just extraordinarily gifted. And you'll notice it was a cool day, but it was a beautiful spring day looking out over the valley. When I'm ambitious, I'll ride up on Skyline Drive. It's a lot of ups and downs, but it's beautiful views and a good workout. That's one of my favorite rides for sure.
Yeah, we see cyclists up there all the time. I'm up there regularly hiking with a variety of groups of people. And so we see the cyclists, and I'm always amazed, especially that first approach. Those first 5 miles seem to be straight uphill, and these guys are really, really hitting it.
Well, Rob and I just caught each other and had caught up on conversation for that, and I didn't even notice the 5 miles. It was all uphill, as you say.
It sure is. Now, I know, Cran, this is another favorite view of yours.
And Cope, do you want to comment on it? You know where it is as well as I do, because this is one of our favorite rides together.
Ah,
Well,
awesome.
Yeah, I don't know exactly where it is. It may be along that ride back to the car. It's on Salem, near Salem Road, Piletown.
Yeah, it's this one happens to be on hill number 10 of the 11 going up along Milldale Road.
Okay, yeah. Well, one of the rides we love is it's a roller coaster on the way out from Millwood, and it's good because you get a lot of hills, but they're not real long, but they give you a good burn by the time you get to the top, and then you can try to speed down or coast down as you need to. And we go to Bowling Green. You have beautiful views of down toward the river, and of course across to the Blue Ridge. And we'll often see various kinds of birds. I've seen bald eagle there, and these fences that stone fences that are so beautiful. That's on Piletown. I know that for sure.
Yeah, that's one of our favorite views, just along Piletown Road in Clark County.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful to point out to everyone. Cycling is it's engaging you physically, but also all your other senses as well, visually, and of course, smell and that feeling of the wind. It's just a wonderful experience. So I think, Cope, this is one of your favorite places. It's actually one of my places to hike as well.
Is it? Well, I love the Roanoke Valley. I grew up there, and Mill Mountain's not a high peak. It's in the city itself, but they've built a road that goes up to Mill Mountain. And the kind of fun thing is I don't know, maybe 900 feet. I'm not sure what it is from the river. It may not be that far, but it's all uphill the whole way. And then it gets steep in 2 or 3 places. But the time you get to the top, you feel like you've really accomplished something. And of course, you're rewarded with this wonderful view. That's Tinker Mountain and McAfee Knob in the background. And so that's Tinker to the left. It's a beautiful valley. And if you're feeling really strong, then you can get back on the parkway from there. I've done that a few times. I haven't done the Roanoke Mountain loop, but that takes you up. You probably know about Roanoke Mountain, but anyway, that's another distance, very steep portion of the ride if you want to do that. So there's also, of course, Explorer Park and a bikeway there that's down at the river. It's quite nice for walking and for cycling. Yeah.
Excellent. It's nice to see all these options. And of course, this is a favorite, your reward. We just saw this beautiful view for getting to the top of the mountain, but we see that there's also some rewards after you finish cycling. So I hear this is a favorite stop of yours as well.
Well,
Yes.
sometimes we do this while we're cycling. We have about 6 miles to get back to sometimes our starting place after we've tasted wine, but we don't hit it too hard. I'll let John fill in there.
Well, that particular ride was after a 100-mile ride, so I was quite thirsty.
Oh, that was it.
And Juliet was nice enough to pose with me, even though I probably smelled pretty ripe. But the wine was very, very tasty that day.
I'm sure it was. Well, one of the things that fascinated me about our conversation is, you do group rides, but you also, and some of the rides are multi-day events, and you also do charity rides, and I believe that might be through some of the organizations that you're with. So why don't we just talk a little bit about that, and maybe why don't we just start with this event and maybe talk a little bit more about the community of cycling and what you can achieve together as a group.
I don't recognize everybody. This is Ken Tenney, who handles the newsletter in the yellow jacket there, and he's been a big leader with the Wheelman for a long time. But this is also a ride called the Snowball Express. It occurs on January 1st, and so after you're feeling filled and too heavy after Christmas or after New Year's celebrations, this is a great way to feel hearty and healthy. So this is not a charity ride. It's just a fun ride to be together. And of course, sometimes the weather doesn't permit it. I forget maybe whether this year it was, or I forget how it was. But the charity rides, I'll mention one. There's going to be one later this summer for CCAP on August the 28th. And there was one regular one that we had for the Boys and Girls Club. And I'm not sure whether that's still a regular. John, do you know whether that's a regular ride?
That's transferred into the CCAP ride now.
Oh, it is? Okay. Yeah.
Again, the Winchester Wheelman is a local biking group that really is active in supporting riders at every level of skill. And they do support some of these local charities and turn out in numbers for some of these kind of rides, these organized rides. I do want to laugh, John. You've got a nice cold day for your Snowball Express, but I don't see any snow in the background on that one.
No snow.
Yeah, I was almost thought it would have been early spring or late fall, but looks like everybody's smiling and ready to have some fun.
Right.
Yeah, you mentioned the Winchester Wheelman, which is a local group. Is this part of this organization too, or is this just a couple of guys out for a ride?
Well, to be honest, we're not as regular riders with the Wheelman as we should be. We have a group of about 5 or 6 of us that ride together a lot, and so we're comfortable together. We want to catch up with each other, and then we'll join with Wheelman on some days and some days not. But this is just sort of our regular. There are about 5 of us that ride together pretty frequently, and this is overlooking the Etiquette. We ride sometimes in West Virginia across, or northern Clark County.
Maybe this is a good time. We have a picture here with a couple of different bikes. I know we have some photos of what you guys, especially Cran, what you ride, but maybe talk a little bit about just selecting the right bike in terms of like road conditions and what if you might make different choices depending on where you're going to be cycling.
Right. My bike, I changed my bike after an injury, back injury, and I think this is sort of a cautionary tale. One thing that you're supposed to ride with is a flat back so that you keep from injuring if you hunch your back. And I think I was doing that too much for a good while and had sort of an injury. And so I changed my back to what's called a relaxed geometry. And if you look at my bike, you can't tell it probably by looking at it, but it's got a larger wheelbase and a shorter top tube. So I can ride more upright, and it's got a higher top tube, head tube, so that I don't have to bend over quite as far. So I ride, I don't ride as fast because of that, because there's more wind resistance, but it's a more comfortable ride for me, and it helps me keep my back straight so that I don't create that problem again. So this is called a specialized Roubaix, and it has some what's called relaxed geometry, so that the wheelbase is a little wider, but it looks like a regular road bike.
And what would you ride this in? all types of road conditions or specific? Like, would you switch out to another bike if you were on a mountain trail or something like that?
I couldn't ride this on a mountain trail. Sometimes we'll ride over gravel. We've done it for, not good for long distances on gravel. I wouldn't take it on the C&O Canal or some other place for long distance. This is almost exclusively for road cycling, which is 90% of what we do.
Excellent. Okay. Cran, did you want to point something out or talk a little bit about?
I think John did some research and Cope did some research that indicated there are like 14 different types of bikes, and people use them for all kinds of things. And the beauty of it is that pick a bike that matches your lifestyle. You know, many people have a nice big front basket and they carry their groceries home on the front of their fat wheel bike, and that's great. There's BMX bikes that allow you to, they're small and compact and have wheel pegs that allow you to do tricks. There's a wonderful BMX course at Jim Barnett Park. Most of us tend to either have what the Europeans would call racing bikes, which is what's in this picture. They're designed to go pretty fast. Or we have mountain bikes that are designed to go off-road and go over tougher terrain and have sturdier frames and wider wheels. And two, you know, so that you can go through the beautiful trails around this area. But that's just a small sampling of the many types of bikes that are out there.
Well, two that we didn't mention were cyclocross bikes, which are sort of a mix between the road bike and a mountain bike. And then also the newest category is called adventure bike, which is somewhere between a cyclocross and a road bike. So there's something there for every kind of cyclist and condition. And a lot of it depends on what's comfortable for the person and how fast they want to ride and who they're riding with.
And while we still have this photo up, I thought maybe we'd take an opportunity to discuss proper gear, because all of you are modeling what appears to be the standard gear, footwear, and clothing that might be appropriate for a cyclist. So why don't we just talk a little bit about what you guys are wearing, the materials, and why they might be more appropriate for cyclists than say wearing jeans or, you know, sweats.
John,
Fran, do you want to start on that?
Well, first of all, we're mammals, which stands for middle-aged men in Lycra. And, you know, it's not
middle-aged is kind.
Well, that's being kind to us now. It's not exactly a great fashion statement in general, but it works well. They're, you know, they're skin tight, they're minimal wind resistance, and they're comfortable. You may notice I'm wearing a backpack. It's pretty empty. I'll keep a spare rain jacket in there as well, so that we can change between long sleeve and short sleeve, or we can throw on a rain resistant jacket pretty easily. And that's part of the equipment. But the essential equipment that you can see there, all of us are wearing helmets, and I wouldn't ride around my neighborhood without a helmet.
Right.
You can go
And
down.
I think our next picture has a great photo of everybody again on all these cool helmets.
Yeah. And with us here are the Simpsons and Chris Northrup. And this is part of the Boys and Girls Club ride. But again, you can see the helmets, and they're really important. You can see most of us wear gloves. There's a lot of road vibration, and gloves dampen it and make you more comfortable. We all have showy jerseys we like to wear and show off where we're from or what we believe in and what we've been involved with.
Well, also we want the motorists to see us.
Yep.
Well, we need to talk about that too, but there's Cran's bike. We'll get back to this in a second. Well, we'll look at Cran's bike because you're talking about essential items, and maybe there's something essential on your bike here.
There are two pieces here. You know, this is a specialized bike for racing, and you can see the rear wheel is cut into the, you know, so it's minimized wind resistance. But most road bikes, I've got water with me, and I got a water cage, and I've got clipped pedals, and so I can clip my foot into the pedals, and then I can put power into the upstroke as well as the downstroke. Basically, my body is integrated into the bike, and it's just more efficient. And you'll see that in all of our road bikes. We do use, and most people that are serious recreational cyclists have pedals that you can clip into.
So your shoes, you have special shoe footwear then as well that allows you to clip in.
Yeah,
I can show you that.
We'll do a quick show of our footwear just so you can see it more.
Oh,
Here's a shoe, if you want to look at this one. This one's got a look, what's called a look fixture for it. And it will clip in. There's the SPD is even more popular, which can be used a little easier for both mountain bicycling and for road cycling. But this one's almost exclusively for road bikes. But it has three places where it locks in, so you have a broad base for your balls of your foot to push on the pedal.
mhm,
And
excellent.
I would also put in a plug for a mirror on the bike to be able to look behind. I don't know. This is hard for John. Can't use this because his bike puts him down, as you can see, with the handlebars.
Right, here's a picture of John as he's
Yeah.
crouched over to his handlebars.
Yeah, so he couldn't use this kind of mirror system on his glasses that I can. But I like to be able to see behind me, because if a car's coming behind, then I look forward to see what may be coming, what kind of congestion there might be. So I find it very helpful.
I
And what
actually
would
have a mirror on there in this picture,
Mhm.
and I can only use it when I sit upright. And my bike is designed for me to be hunched over the handlebars with a very low aerodynamic posture. So I can't use it in the position I'm in that particular shot.
And so this allows you to go quicker, right? And helps you increase your speed, lower the wind resistance.
Precisely.
I'll be pedaling like crazy going down a hill, and John will just be floating down the hill. And he can go about halfway up the next hill, just coasting sometimes before he has to kick in again. So the aerodynamics is good.
I see. All right.
You want to go back to that one? I'll tell you about the story. That is a particularly day that lives in infamy in my bike cycling career. I had 6 flat tires over the course of a 100-mile ride.
Oh my.
And I ended up having to finish on somebody else's bike. They took my bike out of circulation to figure out what it was doing to chew up the tires. So there I am with beer at the foot, and mulling over how in the heck I could flatten out 6 tires in the course of one ride. But that was a new record for me. I'm a big guy and I weigh a lot, and so I tend to puncture tires more than some of these 150-pound, pro cyclists. But I've never done six tires in one day before.
Do you carry any extra equipment for the possible breakdown of a bicycle while you're cycling?
So the essential equipment is a cell phone. We never leave without at least one of us having a cell phone. In an emergency, we can contact people. When I ride distance or I ride alone, I carry a backpack, and in that backpack, I'll have a spare tire or spare tube, and I'll have a pump. And those are essential. The other essentials that I always carry with me are, well, I've got a bike computer I keep on with me to track what I'm doing. I carry water, and in the backpack, I'll also have some snacks. And those don't have to be fancy things. When I'm racing, I will use specialty products like goo. But when I'm just riding around the area, I'll use nut bars or candy bars, just something to keep me from bonking when we run out of energy.
Right. How much water do you generally carry for your daily ride of 24 miles? Do you bring water with you? Do you tank up before you take off?
One bottle's usually plenty for 24 miles. Sometimes we'll bring water home if it's from that short a ride. I guess John will often use a Camelback when you're going on a longer ride, right, John?
But I only use that in the desert for water. One bottle that we can refresh after 24 miles is fine. But you do want some liquid with you. And people that are doing endurance cycling or will often fill it with an electrolyte solution, so they're getting salt as well as water, and so they keep their minerals going. But we tend to keep it pretty simple and just have water in our, in a little container.
I don't like using the Gatorade and drinks in my water bottle, but it tends to get funky after a while. and so I use water, and then I drink my Gatorades when we have a long stop somewhere or have lunch, and so tend not to use it that way.
While we're talking about this, one of the things we kind of touched on a little bit, and you've mentioned once or twice, is the safety. You want to see traffic, you want to see what's on the road. Could we talk just a little bit about in our area how well the bike lanes are, or bike etiquette, and maybe touch a little bit on what the laws are in Virginia in terms of right-of-ways for cyclists? Because I know in some areas it's really not safe to be a cyclist. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, the rule used to be that cars had to allow 3 feet for cyclists, but the laws changed, and July 1st, there's a new set of laws that will go into effect. I think John may have researched those a little more than I have, but now for one, cars are encouraged to cross a lane, to give you a full lane when they pass you if there's no oncoming traffic.
So there's an etiquette theme here, which is the cyclist actually owns the lane. So it is not typical, but a cyclist may move into the center of the lane as a way of signaling to a motorist, do not try to pass me. So for instance, I'm approaching the crest of a hill. If there's a car behind me, I may somewhat rudely, apparently rudely, move into the center, but I know he can't safely pass before we hit a blind spot on the hill.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of the time, cyclists will typically be as far right as practical.
Mm-hmm.
And that may not be flush against the edge of the road where there may be debris or potholes, but it's usually within 2 or 3 feet of the edge of the road. And as Coke just said, that leaves motorists room to give us a good 3 feet or more and still pass safely. The change coming in July that's interesting and maybe a little controversial for motorists is that cyclists are now allowed to, even in traffic, cycle 2 abreast. And what that may seem kind of rude to the motorist because it looks like we're blocking the lane. In fact, it's safer for motorists to pull out across the yellow line and pass 2 riders riding abreast than it is trying to pass a group of riders strung out over 100
Right.
yards.
Gotcha.
And so that is a change in Virginia that's going to take effect July 1st. And you may see more people riding 2 abreast. We're old school. We tend to try to pull over and go single file when there's a motorist approaching us, knowing that most motorists are more comfortable. They can just see they've got plenty of clear road by which to pass us.
We have had some unfortunate experiences. There's some people who just really don't believe bicycles should be on the road. We were on Cedar Creek Grade, and this is why that's become a little more of an issue for using that route that I mentioned earlier before we started. Because we had a fellows who buzzed us, probably within a foot or two of 3 cyclists riding in a line. And then when a couple of us yelled out, 3 feet or, to give us space, he pulled in front of the first person so that we couldn't proceed and started yelling at us and telling us, if we wanted to be on the roads, we should be paying taxes like cars do, or, and it got ugly. And, I tried to assure him that we were just wanted him to obey the law. That's the law, 3 feet. But so there are people who won't recognize that. And you just have to recognize there's some real jerks. And that's something that's a bit scary from time to time.
Yeah, I'm sure it can be. I know locally, our county has a biking and pedestrian plan, and I know that they're working on those connector places and make sure as the lanes are put in that they make sense in terms of transition spaces or where turn lanes are in place, and to make sure that it's safe for everyone involved. I know that that's something we're identifying and trying to do a better job here locally, making sure that when we connect all our outdoor spaces, that they're connecting correctly too, and so that everybody is safe. Why don't we?
Can I just make an additional comment on that?
Yes,
there are
please.
a lot of people that really do not want to ride on roads, and that's fine. It's great for people. They can use the Green Circle. They can use, the C&O Canal or the W&O&D trail, so they don't have to deal with traffic. The optimal thing is where there is a cyclist sharing a road with an automobile is that there are enough cyclists so the motorist expects a cyclist to be there. And even if you have, as there is in Winchester, a dedicated road along Valley Avenue, a dedicated lane for cyclists, I was hit by a car who insisted they didn't see me. Even though they recognized me at the stop sign 30 seconds before they hit me, they said they'd seen me. But I was in the bike lane, but they were just not prepared to consider there might be a cyclist on their road. And so they just pulled into an entrance and didn't give me clearance. So, I have that distinction of being hit while in a bike lane in town.
Wow.
So the theme for me is there need to be enough cyclists on the road so they're expected rather than a surprise. And that's when the culture starts changing and cyclists and motorists cooperate more. And I hope we'll move to that.
Yeah. So do you think, because one of the things that I learned while preparing for tonight's episode is how popular cycling actually is. And I have run into so many people here locally in the Front Royal area that are avid cyclists. And they're out cycling and they're really passionate about effectuating change with our bike lanes and making sure that the public is educated about etiquette and the laws. So do you think this is got to be approached from multiple directions in terms of getting cyclists out there and making sure that it's safe for them? Like, it seems like to get more cyclists on the road, they need to feel safe. And we also need to make sure motorists understand they're going to be out there and how to approach them and how they can coexist on the roads.
I think it's a three-prong. There's the state side, which makes the laws and executes them. And this should be a part of course, of the training that the tests that people get from the DMV and part of our driving test. There's a side of, I think, the advocacy side, and which is the groups like the Wheelmen and other cyclist groups that need to try and do what we can in terms of education. And then the individual cyclists, we have to be courteous as well as what we expect of drivers as well. And I know at times, and I've had some people kind of blow at me because I'll blow through an intersection sometimes. So you have to be kind of careful how it appears as well as just what's safe.
Great. Thank you for sharing that, because I think that is important information and something to keep in mind as we go forward, especially those of us in the outdoor industry. Those three-prong approach is important. I wanted to switch gears a little bit because I know that while you ride locally and for fitness and for fellowship, you also have these grand adventures, and that you've both done visited some pretty amazing places on your bike. So what I have on the screen now is of Cran, who had this cross-country adventure. So maybe you want to talk a little bit about that, Cran, and what that entailed.
I'll be glad to. That's the route from San Diego to Tybee Island in Georgia. It was a 27-day trip, which meant we covered 2,900 miles in that 27 days.
Wow.
It was organized with, rest stops planned, with hotels waiting for us when we arrived. So truly, all we had to do during the day was ride approximately 100 miles. And I'd never ridden that kind of distance before, so it was a different adventure for me, but it was a wonderful opportunity. And I loved it. That's
Well, I wanted to show this picture because when you shared this with me, it just caught me in the heart. I mean, where is this? This is beautiful.
This is in Arizona, and this was my favorite day on that ride. It was a long day with over 8,000 feet of climbing, and I've just finished climbing up Mingus Mountain, and I'm riding down through the Red Rock into the town of Jerome, and looking out over past the Front Range into the beginning of the Great Plains laying out in front of me. And it was just, heart-stoppingly beautiful.
Oh, it is.
So I had to pull over and stop my bike and take the picture. So you got the red rock in the foreground, and you've got the plains out stretching out endlessly in the distance. And, we live in a glorious country, and it's worth seeing.
We
Yeah.
sure do. And this, what a beautiful way, because look at that map again. You went all the way across country, so I'm sure you saw the great diversity in our geology and our landscape and flora and fauna. It must have been just a trip of a lifetime.
It was a
And
wonderful.
this must be at your endpoint.
Yep, and here we are dipping the wheel in the Atlantic when we arrived, after 27 days of pretty intense cycling. And I was pretty pumped. It was pretty exciting. And
Oh, you look it. I would be too. That's awesome.
then the bike
So
got,
when you started in San Diego, did you put your toes in the Pacific Ocean as well?
yeah, there's a picture of me with the bike in the Pacific, and now the bike's going to touch the Atlantic as well.
So that's great. That's amazing. Now I know the both of you have been on some trips. We see Cope right there in the photo. Now I know, Cope, is this one of the trips that you had some other photos you wanted to share about, or?
No, this is, I don't think I have too many other photos with that. If you go back, this is the group called the Holy Rollers, the yellow one, and all the jerseys. And we, each year there's something called the Virginia Annual Conference of the United Methodist Church meets, and it varies from Roanoke, Williams, from Norfolk and Hampton. And so this group will ride together for 300 plus miles to raise money for an offering, usually for an orphanage, for a health clinic, sometimes in Haiti or Cambodia. There have been different ones. So we help with raising the funds for that. And so it's not quite as plush as what John was talking about. We'd usually sleep with a sleeping bag in a church basement or fellowship hall. But we were supported in our ride. And so I remember particularly a ride from Charlottesville to Hampton, and the ride from Charlottesville to Richmond was beautiful. And then partly on the trip from Richmond to to Hampton, we rode on cobblestones for about 30 miles. Now that was quite an experience on road bikes, rather jarring. So that's something that's happened each year. We've been canceled on account of COVID the last year, 2 years.
Right. Yeah, and at some point I think we'll talk a little bit about the impact of COVID. Now, here was a trip that you took to Tuscany, simply stunning and gorgeous. How many days were you in Tuscany cycling around?
We were only cycling for probably 3 or 4 days. So it was we had our wives with us who did not cycle. So we had to kind of pick and choose and help make it work. So they would tour on foot while we took some trips around the countryside. And we would try to how many times do you think we got out, John? 3 or 4?
About 4 times, have different rides around the area. This is near Siena. These are all pictures around the Siena area, rolling, beautiful Italian countryside.
It's a beautiful way to see the countryside. You can really enjoy it and obviously stop and take some photos and whatnot. Awesome.
This is an aspiration for me. I just took this of a cyclist. I wasn't cycling there. So my son lives in Colorado, so I'm looking forward to doing some cycling in Colorado. There's a place called Dillon Lake there that has a nice loop around there. And of course, plenty of mountains to climb as well.
I see that. Well, that's awesome that you still have some aspirations and mountains you want to conquer on your bike.
Yeah, I like this one a lot. Go back to I wanted to see the sign there, give way to train. That's the Irish humor. But we had a couple of days where we just rented a bike while we were in Ireland. I don't know whether the Dingle Peninsula will come up in these slides or not.
I don't think I have that in this series. Yeah, and I thought that was interesting to point out too, that on these trips you had to rent the bicycle when you got to your destination. Right. And that's something that we can all consider when we're traveling is we can rent a bike and take a day and explore the countryside or the city in a different manner. than a tour bus or something like that. How do
Particularly in
you find,
Europe,
I'm sorry, what, Cran?
Europe, you're going to find the bike rental shops are very, very helpful, and they have reasonable prices and good product and wonderful advice about where to ride locally. And I think the same would be said about some of our local bike shops, like, you know, Element Sports and Blue Ridge Bicycles. They really are invested in helping people have a good experience with riding, and they will give advice about local conditions and where to ride, and give not only mechanical support or sales support, but also all kinds of encouragement for cyclists.
I do have a question, and we're going to get to a really spectacular trip that was had in South Africa. But what is when you're in Europe, do you find there's in comparing to what's happening here when you're on the road traveling here, are you finding different conditions there in terms of how motorists treat cyclists, and is it safer? Do you find it safer? Or is it a completely different type of experience? Did you have to be aware of other things than when you're cycling here in the States?
There's you can't, I can't say too much about this. The States is diverse. So we find a big difference just between Frederick County and Clark County. And I don't mean to offend our Frederick County friends, but at any rate, it's a different experience in cycling in Western Frederick County than Clark County, though. We've had a few bad experiences in Clark County, but very rarely motorists seem to respect us being on the roads. I don't know. Do you think it's because there are more cyclists, John, or just less traffic?
Less traffic.
Yeah.
I
But we do find in Europe, it was that people sort of expected cyclists and they respected cyclists.
In Europe, I was on the coastal highways in Spain, and there were cyclists on the expressway sharing lanes with traffic going 100 kilometers an hour. And they managed to do that safely. We witnessed when we were in Italy, a guy going around a roundabout on his bike. He's within a foot or 3 feet of the front grills of cars, trusting that they're going to yield to him. And he's going 20 miles an hour without a care in the world about the cars. He trusts that they are aware he's there and will respect his space. We have not gotten to that level yet. I don't know, John, if you have that slide of the bike trails in Europe, but it was a fascinating experience of just the bike culture in Europe is so developed.
We'll
Do you
come
really want to go to that picture?
Let's we'll pause. We won't move this slide yet.
The other side of cycling.
You want me to go to South Africa now?
Yeah, let's share from South Africa, because that was quite the adventure, and you have some amazing photos from that. So I'm going to stop my screen share for a moment so that you can share yours.
Okay. All right. Is that up?
It's up. Oh,
Okay.
awesome.
So this was for a semester. I was a faculty member of Semester at Sea. It was sponsored by the University of Virginia. So students, we had 600, we got 400 students and about 30 faculty on a ship and did education. Then when we got off the ship, we would tour and do some educational things, but some of them are recreational. And one of them, they said, was a trip to the wine country and a cycling trip. So I'm going to run through these fairly quickly just to give you a sense of the countryside. Sometimes when the clouds come over the Table Mountain, they call it the tablecloth. And so this isn't Table Mountain, but you can see the clouds coming over the mountain, something like tablecloth as they call it in that area. These are just some of the views along the way. I'm going to go through these very quickly and come to where we had, these are some of the students that we were cycling with. Again, these are rental bikes provided for us. So it was not a technical hard cycling, but at the end of the ride, this is what it was so nice. They had a dinner for us where we got to do wine tasting. And this is probably the nicest feast I've had on a bike ride. You can see here the tasting and the food. So kind of spectacular part of that. So I wish that for everybody sometime. And
Oh, I think that's amazing that this you had students, and part of their education on the sea included this beautiful cycle ride,
right.
and they got to experience the country from this viewpoint, and also the culture and the food. That is just amazing, and it's just another way to be educated and to recreate and experience all these beautiful things. It's just architecture and nature. It's awesome. Thank you.
Yes, you can take me out of that now.
Okay. All right. Why don't we get back to, let's see. I'm going to share my screen again, because we do want to talk about that next slide, which but one of the things we do have to talk about is safety on the road. And oh, sorry, my touchpad is a little sensitive, so we'll leave it right there. And here we see Cran with a broken clavicle. It's definitely an injury, and he spoke before he had gotten hit. So you get injured, you recover, and what I love about you guys' stories is that you resume your passion, you get right back on the bike. But let's talk a little bit about getting injured and what it takes to come back, and also, you know, does it help that you were in a certain condition physically that help your recovery? So maybe just to talk a little bit about that. Fran, you want to start, since this is your lovely photo?
Both of us had serious injuries last year that interfered with our pleasure, but they're part of cycling and we need to talk about it. We try to be careful cyclists. We try to be alert to what our environments are, but when you're, going fast and you've got about 2 square inches of material connecting you with the road, it's pretty easy for things to go wrong. What happened in my case is my brakes were maladjusted. I hit the brake and it locked up and it just threw me. And I went flying through the air, landed on my right shoulder, breaking the clavicle, and you can see the ugly road rash.
Yeah.
John had a accident he'll tell you about where he hit gravel. But all of a sudden you're going along and you're feeling fine, and then all of a sudden you're hitting the pavement, and it is hard and ugly. Now I will say this. The assistance I got from passing motorists and from the rescue squad and then from the emergency room was really encouraging. It's helpful to have people that have got your back. The healing process from something like this takes time, and a big part of it is psychological. My clavicle took surgery, and it took 6 weeks after that, but once they had the titanium rod implanted and I'd healed up, they said, you can go back to cycling. And the first time I got back on my bike, I was having all the acute stress reactions that go with it. My heart was pounding. I didn't feel confident. I managed to avoid a couple hills that I was nervous about. And I really took some will to go back along the stretch of highway where I had the accident.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
But
How long did it take you to get back into your groove, like to find that feeling of, yeah, this is where I belong and I'm safe again?
I don't think I'm there completely yet, because I'm still not doing a couple strips of road that just feel more dangerous to me. I used to do blithely and happily. So I don't know, maybe it's older but wiser, or maybe I'm still recovering. But I guess the real answer to your question is the joy was back within a ride or two.
Oh, good. I'm happy to hear that.
With it, within probably a month, the hesitancy, the overcaution, the fear was gone, and I was back into the kind of emotional, physical, and spiritual delight that cycling gives me.
Well, one thing for me, when one thing I will do, probably not descend as fast as I used to, because I would often go very fast down hills. And on this particular day that I was injured, I hit some gravel. I've been on the road before, but I hadn't been on it recently, and some gravel had washed in the road. So if you're going fast, you just don't unless you've been on the road the same day, you don't know what the conditions are going to be like. So you have to be careful. So I hit
Right.
the gravel and I ended up having a concussion, a broken rib. It was scary. So I've changed a little bit about the way I ride. I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm fully back and recovered, but I'm pretty much there. This one thing I did decide to get is a helmet with what's called, I don't know if you can see that. It says MPS, MIPS, and it's called Multi-Directional Impact Protection System. And so evidently what causes a lot of concussions has to do with the neck, and the neck being jammed in certain ways. So I would recommend, if you're going to buy a new helmet or get a helmet, to get one with the MIPS technology. It doesn't cost much more than a
Mhm.
regular helmet. So I would recommend that. Just for your friends' amusement, um, here's the helmet that I crashed, and so you can see what that
Wow.
looked like and what happened. So if I hadn't been for the helmet, I probably wouldn't be alive. And this is a little rock they took out of my lip, so you can hear it rattling around in there. So, but I'm back to enjoying riding and happy to be doing it. And you know, I am I'm more careful now in certain ways
Mhm.
because of that experience.
Right.
But
No,
cycling,
I can understand that, but I applaud both of you for getting back on the bike,
Mhm.
because
No, thank you.
after a serious injury, I could see how it might cause you to rethink and maybe choose a different activity. But getting back on the bike takes courage, so I applaud you both.
Well,
Um,
my son highly recommended Peloton to me. He said,
ah,
so that would make, and you know, we have talked about it, how much longer we can safely ride. And we have some friends who use, we haven't talked about recumbent bikes, but there's a lot less distance to fall on a recumbent, and you can get a great workout and still, and if you add a battery to it, there's e-bikes, and if you need it, you can keep up with the speedster. So you can continue doing it indefinitely, safely, if you're just know when to shift your bikes or what kind of bike you're using.
One of the rides the Wheelman does is called a retired day off ride, and it happens on Thursday. Today, there was a picture of an 87-year-old man doing the ride, and he is doing it with his own power and doing it strong. And so it gives me hope that we may have a few years ahead of us still.
gives me hope too that I can still be out there. You guys are awesome. This picture, I wanted to just talk a little bit about how COVID changed the way you occupied the road or cycled together in a group. When we first started chatting, you talked a little bit about that impact. I'm happy to see that you guys still got out there. So tell me how that changed your cycling life.
John, you want to start?
Well, I will tell you this. I set a goal as part of my mental health and sanity. When they closed everything down, I made it a goal to get out and do 30 miles of cycling a day. And I never accomplished that. I averaged about 20 miles a day through this last spring. But what I did was I enjoyed almost totally empty roads in March, April, and May last year. The roads were empty, and the riding was beautiful. And even though there was this pandemic surrounding us, that takes place within the context of this bigger, beautiful world we live in. And the natural world was unfolding with the seasons, and it was glorious cycling. So I will tell you, cycling very much kept my mental health in good stead through the early part of the pandemic. And I cycled more miles last year than I had for a while.
I combined that a lot with hiking in the spring, but here we are trying to keep, I think there was 2 meters was what they were suggesting between, more than that. There was such varying guidance from people about how far you needed to be apart, because ideas, if you're directly behind another cyclist, you could be 20 feet behind him and still pick up the breathing from the cyclist ahead of you. So we would try to, sort of stay not directly behind a person, maybe back at an angle. And if we did, would keep distance. Sometimes we'd keep 20 20 meters apart from each other from time to time. But I think that's become less a fear. Of course, most of us have had the vaccines, but so we don't worry as much. But we're not observing that kind of distancing as much now.
Great. Another question I wanted to talk about, and I know that we are coming in, we're at that 7:30 mark. And this is about the time where I invite our participants to, if you have any questions, go right ahead and start putting them into the chat. I'm sorry, Emery had asked if that was a tandem bike in one of the photos, and how did that work in group ride? I'm not sure which photo that was, but
Well, I remember it was the one of the three of us there at the Pekin Bridge, and no, Anne Marie, that was just two bikes close together that looked like almost like a tandem. But we have friends that do that. There are several wheelmen who, and it's, even though the name is Wheelman, it's a male and female. It has to do with the insurance policy that was directed at a certain time. So it's there's a women's ride, in fact, that's a month. I think they had to cancel it this month, John, or I forget. But anyway, the weather wasn't good. But there's a dedicated women's ride as well. But several people ride tandems in our group, and they're great for downhills. They can really go fast.
Awesome, great. While our participants put some other questions in the chat box, I do have another question, and it's because it's just something close to my heart, and it has to do with, because we're enjoying the outdoor spaces, we want to protect and preserve them. So maybe we can talk a little bit, you've done charity rides and whatnot, but maybe talk about some conservation issues that maybe you are, since cycling does raise awareness of nature and the natural surroundings, maybe you can talk about some of the conservation efforts you've been involved in. I know, John Cope, you've have a couple of things that you're involved in with advocacy and other things.
Right. Well, I was part of something called the Shenandoah Sojourn, which drew attention to the water health and the river health and water quality of the Shenandoah River. We would paddle a portion of the Shenandoah River each year, and we went all the way from, over a course of about 6 years, from Port Republic, the headwaters, to Harper's Ferry. So it was a wonderful way to get to know the river and its health, and what were the challenges to its health. So I would say cycling is just part of, there's a Wendell Berry is one of my heroes, a poet many of you probably know. And he talks about the importance of feeling connected with a certain environment, and of staying there and being, and so I felt that, we could move or go somewhere else, but I wanted to stay here. I feel connected to this valley, and along with that, I feel a sense of stewardship and responsibility for it. So each of these kind of events is deepened that for me. And so cycling's just a part of that. Hiking draws attention to other things, but also did some, so we tried to talk with local officials and with industry along the river about what they were doing, farmers trying to get their cattle off the land, trying to, get cattle farther away from the river. All those things were things that we spoke with them about. I did some things with a student called the Shenandoah Eco Venture, where we traveled, hiked the Shenandoah, the Appalachian Trail through the Shenandoah National Park, and then paddled back on the river, sort of completing the circle, and drawing attention again to ecological concerns. And John and I have both participated in the Virginia Master Naturalist program since we retired. So I'll let John say more about that, since he's more actively engaged in a project right now.
I would comment that you can't cycle without feeling very much attuned to your natural environment. You feel the geography and the geology as you ride up and down the rises. You experience the wildlife in a sometimes immediate way. We've had buzzards just within 2 or 3 feet of us as they lumber into the air. Today I stopped and talked for a moment with a tom turkey on the side of the road. On Sunday, I helped a woodland turtle across the road from one side to the other. And those are just, those moments remind you how we're part of this bigger and wonderful world. And so it fits very much with the theme of wanting to be being good stewards of this world.
Mhm.
My particular project with the Master Naturalist is with the Blue Ridge Wildlife Center. And that is a wildlife specific hospital. And each year they will take in about 2,800 patients and will treat native wildlife. It's not supported by the federal government or the state government. It's all, supported by volunteers and donors, but it is committed to rehabilitating and releasing native wildlife. And right now they're in the middle of baby season. They've got a baby otter, they've got baby squirrels, baby rabbits, and all kinds of things going on over there. And my role with them is they have what they call wildlife ambassadors, animals that cannot be released because of the nature of their injuries. And I try to work as an interpretive naturalist using those ambassadors as a way of helping people get a sense of the richness of the natural life around us.
Mhm.
So I would invite people to plan to come out and visit the Blue Ridge Wildlife Center and join me on the wildlife walk at some point.
One thing the Master Naturalist program does not encourage and does not do is because of political reasons, they do not get involved in advocacy. My advocacy is rooted with the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy and another group called Virginia Interfaith Center for Power and Light. And they do address issues that affect environmental racism that's being more recognized, and also issues that affect climate and pollution and other effects. So that advocacy is sort of separate from the other part, but I think feeling connected is part of what makes me motivated
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
participate in that.
Mhm. Awesome. Thank you, gentlemen. Barbara?
We've had a couple questions coming through Facebook, and they
Okay.
kind of tie together. Ideas for trails for beginners that might be groups, could be various ages of family members, but several people are going to be beginners. And if there's any suggested trails. And then somebody wondered, do Boys and Girls Club have clubs for kids to ride, or something more information about that?
One of the features of the Boys and Girl Club's ride is that the Blue Ridge Bicycle Shop and some of the folks that were involved in the ride would buy bikes, and
Okay.
for people who were part of the Boys and Girls Club who were able to complete the ride, they got to keep the bike.
Oh,
So it was a
sweet.
wonderful way of getting bikes to folks who might otherwise not have them. So I think that answers that one question.
As far as riding safely in the community, there are portions of the green circle that I think are comfortable and safe for beginners. And again, you might go to Clark County and drive around a bit and see what the roads look like and what you feel like you might be comfortable with without too much traffic there. And it always feels a little safer when you're with a group too. So there are rides that are not intended to keep everybody together, that nobody's going to be dropped, and that they're intended for beginners. So you might look at I think I've posted, I hope everybody's got a chance. I've got a link to the Winchester Wheelman and a membership form. I don't know if that got to everybody, but maybe we can put that in the chat. Can we?
And I will send that to everybody the email to everybody that registered for the program. Will get that information from you, John, and also the Facebook groups that you suggested. So
Okay.
that'll go out to everybody who registered for this event.
And I can recommend to those of you in the Front Royal area, our Royal Greenway, particularly down by the river in Easton Park, is a paved pathway. I see a lot of young families with young children riding over there safely. And I believe Rockland Park too has paved pathways and goes along the river. There's some gravel trails as well. It's a combination. So that would also be a safe place for families to ride, or beginners to ride, and find their balance and be safe, and and in those places you're not going to be engaging with any motorists. These are it's trails in a green space and away from that. So it would be a good place to check out.
Well-
Another question has just come up in chat. And are your wives comfortable with all the time you spend on the road? And yes, on one of those trips they biked with you, but maybe talk a little bit about that, about the dynamic with your spouses and your families with your cycling time.
Right. Well, this hasn't been as big a problem for me as it was when I was training for a marathon. I ran 2 marathons in one day, my first and my last. It's a bad joke. But anyway, so it was, when I was training for that, it was, 3 hours between showers and getting, doing all that. And Marcia told me at one time, says, well, you can either be a runner or a father. Which one do you want to be? So that was sort of the end of that for me. But at any rate, the cycling usually it fits fairly well. She has been concerned now about me riding solo and after my accident.
Right.
So she worries about me. And so what I've done is I give her a very definite route that I'm going to do, exactly what I'm going to do, when I expect to be back. And I carry my phone. And that doesn't completely satisfy her, but she's okay with that. There's John and Pia. So, but at any rate, I don't know. I know Pia worries about John too, because he's had a few more. He's had a couple of accidents.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot convince Pia to join me on rides, and I'm sad about that. I've tried to convince her to join me in rides locally, but one of our favorite rides is in Michigan, and this is a picture of us riding on the bluff, looking over Lake Michigan, and she has about a 3-mile ride that she will do happily every day until she dies. And so in those situations, we ride together. She tolerates my riding. She thinks I probably should not ride so much, but it's, and so, but we have enough time together at this point of our life. And I waited till my child rearing was done before I got heavily into some of these things.
Yeah.
Well, I will say that my wife has plenty of things that she's very interested in. She can keep herself well occupied, so she doesn't have to have me around all the time. So, but I appreciate the question. I mean, that's
Yeah, well, I think it is a good question. A lot of my guests, it is something they're really passionate about. Some of them are actual, world-class instructors, or they're running businesses in addition to recreating in their favorite activity. And it does create a certain dynamic within a family, and there's probably a lot of compromising that goes on in those cases, especially if your spouse isn't as passionate about that sport as you are. Did want to talk about, Anne Marie actually got back to us on that tandem bike question. It was actually a different photo. She said it looked like a group on a charity ride, and there was a school in the background.
It was, in fact, the Snowball Express ride, and she saw Ken Tenney and Andrea Cousins on a tandem. And so she is absolutely right. That was a tandem bike. And
yeah.
Many in this area that do enjoy tandem riding.
Okay.
One more from Facebook. What do you all think about bike sharing in communities? And do you see that coming to our community? I know Winchester's doing some surveying on the concept.
I think it's a great thing. And I'd love to see it here. And I feel like we have a city council that seems to be open to new ideas. So I'm hopeful. I don't know if John knows any more about it.
I like the idea of bike sharing, and I like the idea of just generally recognizing that cycling is not only a practical way to get around this area, but it's a wonderful way to enjoy not only the natural beauty, but the history and and it's in this area is accessible, and more cycling would help more people appreciate it.
Right. Yeah, even locally here, we've heard that we might get a bike shop again, which is exciting, and that they're looking at doing a community bike loaner program. And I know there are initiatives underway here locally to connect all our outdoor spaces, because they're not all quite connected. We want to make sure that you can bike to the boat launch areas, that you can bike to the trailheads. And there are multiple ones in our area, but we want to make sure that everybody can connect to them safely and to the downtown, because, you know, you want to start, you'll be able to go to the heart of the town too, where the bulk of our restaurants and breweries are and things like that, and be able to partake in all of those amenities. So that's a great thing. One thing, a question that I have, and actually, and Barbara may laugh at this one, but it's been coming up in every episode.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm ready.
So it's the personal hygiene question. So when you guys are out on these long cycle rides, are you planning your potty stops, or do you have other, and it's come up in
It does. Every question, everyone, yeah.
It's become my standard question, like, poop, pee, and periods. How do we deal with all that, guys, when we're out there in the outdoors doing what you're doing?
Fortunately, I'm not sure exactly how to explain this, They have all those advertisements for men about, how to take care of yourself, but that's not an issue that affects us as far as I know. So we can usually ride for 2 or 3 hours without needing to stop. But when we do, and fortunately, well, it's not so easy on the road, but we find gas stations or someplace along the road. But it hasn't been a problem. I wouldn't say. What do you think, John?
Likewise, one thing is when you're exercising, your body shuts down your digestive system and focuses on your core muscles. So you don't tend to have as many issues with having to go to the bathroom.
Okay.
So that helps. But the reality is, in a pinch, we can find a place to go to the bathroom.
Okay.
And
This is where we need, I think we should allow one of the women listening to speak on this, because they may have a different experience.
Yeah, well, I know so far our other guests have all primarily been in the backcountry. Our last guest is a rock climber, and he actually climbed El Capitan, and they were camping on the wall for 5 days.
Wow.
So of course the question is, what do you do when you need a bathroom, and he actually showed us the poop bag, that they collect and pack everything out, because you can't exactly hang over the edge of El Capitan and, so it's just been a very interesting topic of conversation that I'm discovering. So I've decided to make that a standard question, because people who maybe have never experienced this might want to know,
it was
how do we deal with this? Yeah.
It was one of my fears when I started doing the triathlon stuff, and I asked for advice from my friends, and fortunately my friends are able to give me good advice about how you handle it.
Okay.
Well, how do you handle it during a triathlon?
Well, again, I've never had it during a triathlon.
Ah, okay.
There's a long line at the porta potties before the race starts.
I'm sure there are.
Yeah, there's that. We usually, there's a draining party before we start sometimes.
Okay. But
I
no
have to remember that.
no adult diapers, I guess. So.
No, I haven't had to go there yet.
Oh, here's a good question. As we lobby local government about other bike trails, can we ask them to put porta potties along the paths? Now that's actually a good question. And I know locally, when we're looking at some of these access points, where we can access the boat launches or trailheads, that is a consideration that is part of the discussion. I don't know what the answer is. I can tell you that at quite a few of our public parks down here, and I'm sure up there in Winchester too, there are restroom facilities. They may not be open year round, but they usually are open spring through fall. But yeah, it'd be nice if maybe they're a little more in the more remote places where we're out recreating. That would be nice. We have Barbara, are there any other questions from Facebook?
What do either John or both Johns have a dream trip that's pretty
Great
close,
question.
kind of close to reality that you want to share?
Great question.
I would love to go back to South Africa with
Okay.
some of my friends and do that. They're great trips there. And one of the people on this call, James Simpson, has done a lot of trips with Vermont cycling. I don't know if Jim can be, if we can let him speak, but anyway, some of those appeal to me. How about you, John, or Cran?
Well, both ways. I've got places I'd like to cycle still, mostly in Europe. I think that's a wonderful way of seeing a relatively compact continent, and so I'd like to do some more of that. But I also want to backtrack, and I'm going to share a picture if I can. I can pull it up. And I'm doing this for two reasons. This one is a dream trip, but the other is it's, let's see if I can pull the share feature up here. This is actually a trip I did do, and it was probably my favorite bike trip of all. Has that come up now?
Yes, it's
where is it?
beautiful. That must be Alaska.
You are looking at Mount Denali in Alaska.
Oh,
And
I thought so.
it was a trip in which I was at a place called Kantishna, which is the end of the road inside the park. I hitched a ride with a bike for 40 miles towards the entrance of the park, and they dropped me about 8:30 in the morning. And that meant there wasn't going to be another vehicle or another human being around me for probably 4 hours. And I rode back to my campsite on a mountain bike along a road. And that particular day was clear. Now, this is not my photo, it's a stock photo, but the mountain was there as a presence for the whole ride. And I share this because I think both John and I are very acutely aware that cycling for us is not just fitness, it is a spiritual experience. And riding along with the kind of benign presence of that mountain watching over me, riding along with the excitement and a little bit of the fear because I was passing places where I'd seen grizzly bears, riding along with the majesty of watching mute swans come in and find nesting sites, or watching an elk wallowing in the water, and watching the ice melt on this reflecting pond at Wonder Lake. In those moments, you know, it is a profoundly spiritual experience. It's not just the endorphins that are generated by the exercise. It is something more and beyond that. And I think that's critical. And so I wanted to emphasize that in sharing the picture as well. But that was probably my peak experience cycling. And this was 8 years ago, just riding in Denali. But I can tell you, I have the same experience. I had it today riding at White Post. You know, the thoughts quiet, the world disappears. I'm in tune with the body and the natural surrounding. And it's about as meditative and a grateful experience as I can imagine. So it moves me to talk about cycling. And I don't think it's exclusive to cycling, but cycling is my vehicle for having that sense of being able to be at one with something much bigger than me.
Well, one way I would add to that, and a lot of times for me, it's when the quiet moments that I take a moment off the bike, you know, I get to a certain area and one place along the trail, the road, the spring peepers were out in chorus, and just listening to the spring peepers, or taking in a view over an apple orchard, or after a hard climb, and finally letting the body slow down and the heart stop pounding enough to breathe deeply. And I'm right now doing some research on the experience of awe, and there's the most common experience for awe is in nature.
Yeah.
Religion is close second. And of course, those both overlap for me as areas of interest. But
Beautiful.
so what happens in the experience of awe, the most common experience is one of vastness. The experience, a lot of time when you're looking at a horizon, or you're looking at the Milky Way or something vast, and then there's an internal experience of accommodation that comes, which is your place in the universe is suddenly reduced. You know, all the important things that were making you feel worried or scared or overwhelming are put in perspective. And so it has a way of, and they say that there's, in positive psychology, that there are some, that it gives you a greater sense of gratitude, generosity. So those are some things that positive come out of the experience, I think, of of awe that we have in nature, and whether it's the bike or the trail or something else that gets us there.
Awesome, thank you. We have another question, and it's a good one too. Rebecca wants to know, since you mentioned grizzly bears, have you encountered dangers other than rogue cars that were difficult to manage?
We've had some friends who came mighty close to deer. That's one of the scariest things, you know.
Really?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought that, but
I wouldn't,
guess,
yeah, I thought the deer would run away. No?
No, they may be crossing the road, same as a motorist, and so
Oh,
the-
yeah.
people have been knocked down. That's
Ooh.
and I don't think I have seen a few slow turtles in the road, but that was always more amusing than dangerous.
How about dogs, neighbors' dogs? Any dogs running out from the, no?
Well, I will mention my friend Barry Penholler, and he cycles down in Madison County. He had a dog come after him and knocked him over. He broke his hip. So
my
it was pretty awful. Yeah, dogs can be pretty scary, and
Yeah.
The mundane but very real danger for cyclists is other cyclists. I tend to avoid group rides unless I know and trust the people I'm with in the group. I've seen plenty of people suddenly swerve left into the path of the person behind them and things like that. And so it's helpful if you are going to ride to join a group like the Winchester Wheelman, where they will teach you very directly how to be a considerate and effective group rider.
yeah, and of course the other thing is potholes that all of a sudden you're looking around at something and bang, and so you're jolted out.
All right, thank you for that. Well, are there any other questions, Barbara? Because we're coming up on
I don't
the
have
8
any
o'clock
right now.
hour. No, we're good. All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening and exploring the world of cycling. I would like to say that I was wonderfully surprised with the world of cycling and how much interest there is in it. And I'm hoping to schedule some future segments to talk more about cycling and maybe talk about some of the other topics within, maybe talking more about families in cycling and maybe racing too. I thank Cope and Crandell for being so generous and sharing their love of cycling, their photos and their stories and their insights. Thank you very much. I hope that they have inspired you all as they've inspired me to pull out your bicycle, have it serviced properly, make sure you have the correct recommended safety gear, so have a helmet, and then go for a ride. All registered participants, you will receive via email a thank you gift, and it's a list of resources of local cycle clubs, cycle routes, website resources, and print materials that you can read for more information about the world of cycling.
Right.
Gentlemen, thank you again. And next month, I'd like to invite everybody to join us on the 15th when we will be going step by step with Lisa Klepp. She's a local adventure-seeking woman who has climbed Mount Kilimanjaro and other high peaks in the United States. So reserve your spot tonight. And until then, enjoy the spring weather and explore the outdoors. Happy trails, everyone. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.